gonna put the makeup on and everything. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I was a bit late coming on. I was talking to a potential client, and they're very sweet, and they said, okay, I just want to check I've got the right process for redundancy. So I'm straight in here with this. And since this part goes into the first thing we're going to talk about today, is about redundancy processes. So what he has is, it's a golf club, and they want to restructure the office, which is absolutely fine. They haven't really got anybody who knows about, you know, how to do office stuff, Microsoft Office stuff. They don't know somebody who's got social media. They need to go more in that direction. And the people they've got at the moment are not great, but one of them doesn't count, so they're going to stay. That's fine, but the other person needs to go. And he said, but it's really straightforward because we're going to do a redundancy process. I've researched the redundancy processes. And it's really straightforward. I can see that. And it's really easy, actually, because we've only got one person to make redundant. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop you there. It's not really easy if you have one person at all. I know you think because of the amount of work involved, it's easy, but it isn't, because the courts see it is possible to make one person redundant, absolutely. But you have to go through so much effort to make sure it is an absolutely clean dismissal, because the courts tend to see at first instance as unfair dismissal. Why is that only one person's role that's at risk of redundancy? Why is it not the department? Why is it not everybody at that level? And it's making sure that you got it right. And then he says, oh, well, yeah, well, I mean, he's 73 anyway. Okay, so now we've got one person being made redundant or at risk of redundancy, and a protected characteristic. The guy's been there for 16 years, so it's not going to be incredibly cheap anyway. It's like, okay, actually, it's going to be a lot of effort to do a clean process, because he's also saying, oh, there's no positions to offer him. It's like, you've just told me what position you want to have, so we would be offering him that. Oh yeah, but you can't do it. That doesn't mean we're not offering it to him. We absolutely have to offer it to him. And then he has to say, no, I'm not interested, and everything. So he may then take he's on 12 weeks notice, plus redundancy pay was 3,500. He might take that. He might go away, and that will be the last you hear about it. But he actually has 4 months from the date of termination to start a tribunal claim. And for the whole of that 4 months, you would be waiting to hear whether he actually did it. And it's then actually, it's going to be a lot quicker, a lot easier to control if we actually just do it, it's never just, but do a settlement agreement with this guy. And it was interesting that the club, who have a very forward-looking board, hadn't ever considered, or actually it sounded like never even heard of settlement agreements as an option. And I was talking through, okay, so actually the easiest thing, this guy's on £8,000 a year because he works part-time, and he's 73, he's been there 16 years, so he's probably, I'm going to hope he's being paid minimum wage, but okay. So he's on £8,000 a year. So I'm like, well, okay, then you're having the conversation saying, we will give you 1 year's pay, including notice, if you sign a settlement agreement, and then we can have a retirement party and and but he does need to go and see a solicitor. And this is a key thing about settlement agreements. The settlement agreement is only valid and enforceable, i.e. that they can't sue you, if they've had legal advice. They are not expected to be able to understand a settlement agreement, the legal language in a settlement agreement, to know what rights they're giving up. So if they don't have a solicitor advising them, because this club was then saying, well, what if he doesn't like solicitors? What if he doesn't want to use a solicitor? He just wants to sign it. Isn't that just his problem then? It's like, and that is why we have to have a solicitor, because in the past, I mean, probably talking about 20 years in the past, employers did say, oh, well, if you've signed it, your fault for not reading it properly. And the courts went, that's a bit unfair, isn't it? Because you have all the access to this legal information as the employer. The employee does not have access to this legal information. And it's unfair to expect them to go and get legal information without knowing that you're definitely going to give them the money. You know, it's just, So you have to, as the employer, pay for the legal advice. It is capped at a maximum of £500, and we have been putting into our agreements that we will pay £400 plus VAT, and that has been accepted in 90% of the cases. There've been a couple of like, oh, I've done extra and I've held their hands while they cried. It's like, they haven't been crying. We know they haven't been crying because we've been talking to them as well. And actually, we're not paying you £1,500 in your legal fees. We told you what we would pay you, and that's it. So the maximum you have to go up to is £500. Obviously, you can choose to do more, but legally, it's just up to £500 plus VAT, and you'll pay that to the solicitor directly, not to the employee to pay to the solicitor. Okay, so it's making sure it's a quicker way. We can't make sure that we can't guarantee that the employee is going to accept a without prejudice conversation firstly, or which means it's off the record to have their settlement agreement conversation, or that they will accept the amount of money. But if you do it the other way, which you can, is to go through that redundancy process, you can do as clean a process as you want. It wouldn't stop a discrimination claim. And the problem with the discrimination claim is that the onus is on you, the employer, to prove your innocence, not on them to prove that you are guilty. So he's 73. He could say they only chose me for redundancy because I'm 73, and the club would then have to defend that at tribunal if it went all that way. I mean, we'd be strongly recommending not to go all that way. But we've got a solicitor who charges a fixed fee for cases. So for unfair dismissal, it's £9,500 plus VAT. For a basic and entry level discrimination, which is what this would be, it would be £13,500. For a complicated discrimination case, it's £19,500. Now, those are set fees for the solicitor side. You also, if you went to court, would have a barrister for 1 or 2 days, probably more likely 2 days, and that's £3,000 upwards per day. And you don't get hourly rates, it's per day. Okay, so you could absolutely fight that, say it wasn't discrimination, get to court, prove it, show that you've done a perfect redundancy process, you've done everything right. The judge says, yeah, you're right, that's okay, case dismissed. You will have won, but you will have paid £13,500 plus £3,000 to get there, plus spending all the time and effort to get there. The ex-employee will not have to pay any fees. There is no fine for him. They would never have to pay your legal fees. That just doesn't happen. So it's just bearing in mind that, yes, you could go through a process, but actually in this case, if you've got one person and they've got a protected characteristic, it's going to be safer and quicker and cleaner if you do a settlement agreement. Okay. Sorry, just went straight. I literally had to get off the phone with this potential client. So I'm obviously being very smiley and upbeat with him, but it's like, no, I really have to get off the phone. No, really, I've got to go and do my Zoom meeting now. So he's like, yes, but just one more thing. No, really, really got to go. So anyway, so that was my one of things to think about this week. Catherine, Liz, anything? Catherine's. There you go.
I do. So obviously Christmas is coming, and you may have some Christmas office parties set up, or you may have already had them, in which my advice would be too late for you. But I don't want to be a killjoy, but these events do attract some issues sometimes. Mel's kind of nodding. So it's just a reminder / warning that if anything happens at these events, you can't just use the stance, oh, well, it's a Christmas party, I'm not going to do anything about it. You have to do something about it. Yeah. So if something happens at the event itself, you're probably not going to start your investigation there because everyone's a bit, well, let's just say drunk, maybe, if it's the kind of parties I've been to. So you don't want to start gathering witnesses, you don't want to stop the DJ and start gathering the witnesses there. So it's about making the situation safe. So if, common events are unfortunately violence, harassment, even through to assault, really. So making the initial situation safe, i.e. sending that person home who's potentially committed to the act. And then the next day is you start your investigation, when everyone's got clearer heads. So it's just that strong message. You can't just say, well, it wasn't on work premises. For example, we went to a restaurant and it happened. It's a work event. It's a work Christmas party. You do still need to treat this as if it happened in the workplace. I've just seen a case has come up. It's a few years old now. Just to put some sort of context into it. So it was a club/restaurant had their office party at the premises. The chef decided to sort of give a headlock to the bar manager. All caught on CCTV. She didn't. She reported it, but said, "Just want to let you know, but I don't want anything to happen." So they didn't. That's where they left it. Unfortunately, a few days later, she become quite injured. Her injuries are actually quite severe. She's left with paralysis in her face. So when she then tried to come back to the employer, they said, "Well, you didn't want to do anything, and it was an office party. We can't do anything." She did resign, and she has won a constructive dismissal case. Not as much as I thought. So she got £8,000 in compensation plus, £6,000 in compensation plus 8.5 legal fees. Because the judge was saying this was a work event, and the employer failed to follow any process, even to investigate the matter. So yes, really, I said I don't want to ruin the office parties, but if you do witness anything, then it needs to be acted on. We can't just rely on it was off-site, it was a party, we all had a drink, because unfortunately you can end up in these quite extreme, but you can end up in a tribunal.
Yes, and the other thing to remember is that this applies to all levels. We did have a general manager who was dismissed. We weren't involved in the dismissal. We were called by him after he'd been dismissed. So they'd all been out at their meal. Everybody got a bit drunk. Some of the females were wearing low-cut tops. They're allowed to. He decided it would be funny to throw peanuts down the cleavage, and which was bad enough. And then to put his hand in to pick them out. Oh my God, because he was drunk, because it was funny. And of course, that is not how it was seen. And he was then dismissed for gross misconduct. So it's just being aware. I don't know. When I was young, I was told quite a lot of times by sort of old hands in the business that I was working in, is at the office party, don't drink too much, have one drink and then go on to water, because I'm going to say back in those days, I mean, obviously I'm older than I look. I'm only like 25, obviously, but they said 20 odd years ago, it's like, oh, Bob, he's a bit handsy, so you need to keep the wits about you to keep away from him, because he always goes around with the mistletoe and he'll try and get you into the photocopier room. And it's like, so I always had, you don't drink at office parties, because you need anything that happens. Is either it's not going to be followed up on, like Catherine said, because they'll say, well, everybody was drunk, it's just a party, or I would do something stupid myself. So yes, which it just sounds so sort of, I don't know, what is it, that boring is the word. It's like, not drinking, I'm boring. It's like, oh yeah, but it's work, and I like my colleagues because they're sort of friends, but actually you can be dismissed if you do something inappropriate, and it's like, it's just not worth the risk usually. So yeah. Right. Okay, what else? Liz, have you got some horror stories from this week?
Actually, surprisingly, not as many horror stories. One that just keeps recurring though is absence management, over and over and over again. So where people have been taken or employers have taken their employee through a process, given them an advisory, but then let them go another 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times before they address the issue again. So an advisory is being issued, and then they contact us 4 months down the line and say, well, they've had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 occasions off since then. I'm like, why haven't you addressed it? They're given an advisory, even without a formal warning, you need to move on it straight away. But it's surprising. I understand operationally everybody's busy, but absence always, it just seems to be always there, and if not managed, can escalate quite quickly. And I think it's much harder to support your case after the fact. And when you're scratching around thinking, where's that return to work form from January, or where's that the return to work form from February, and then addressing it with an employee way after the fact and saying, oh, you were off in, you know, May. What was that for? You know, you didn't report your absence properly. It's just a reminder to everyone, especially with the festive period coming up, that people may tend to be absent with hangovers, or just taking the time off to keep on top of their absence reporting.
Great, thank you. The other thing, because it's in some places in the UK today, we've got snow, which is also absence. If you are closed, if your business is closed, if the golf club is closed, then you need to have thought out what you're going to do. I mean, it's a bit late if you're already closed today and you don't know what you're doing. But the point is, if the employees are willing to come to work, and if they've actually turned up for work, particularly, and you say, actually, we're closed, and you send them home, you are required to pay them for that day. Okay, so if you don't want to be paying everybody for that day, you need to set out what your severe weather policy is. I know it doesn't feel severe, but if it's bad enough weather that you are closing for the day and people are scheduled to work, you need to work out now what your policy is going to be. Are you going to be getting them to take their holiday? And you need to tell them in advance, that's why, so that they know what they're doing as well. Are you going to get them to take their holiday? What if you're open and they can't get in? That's a bit easier, I'm going to say. But it's just, and usually for most businesses, it's only one day and certainly not a week that you're closed, unless it's a real disaster. But you do need to work that out. And certainly everybody who is on contracted hours will need to be paid for that time because they're able to come in. Okay. And you're saying, no, I don't want you to work, in which case you've got to pay them. So just to put that into the mix on those absence and the severe weather. The other one that came up on the GCMA advice line, which is not absence, it's about notice periods. And again, it's frustrating when committees think they know everything and they don't, and they do something silly. So the general manager rang me up and said, right, I've just had a meeting with the chairman and he's just given me my notice. I'm like, okay. He's like, yes, I'm on 3 months notice. Give me my notice. I'm like, okay, so how long have you been there? Thinking actually from his tone of voice that he just felt sound very down. It's not nice being given your notice. I understand that. That's why I was down. But I was thinking that he thought he would not be entitled to anything and was fearing confirmation from me that it would be bad news, i.e. tough, you just got your notice, that's fine. He said, oh yeah, I've been there 2.5 years. I'm like, what, really? And he's like, sorry, which sounded, he's like, yeah. I'm like, no, what I mean is I haven't come across that basic rookie mistake from committees for a long time, that they've assumed that just because they've decided to finish with you that they can just give you notice. Usually they have suddenly gone, oh, actually, we'll do a settlement agreement, or we'll do pretend redundancy, or we'll pretend that you've done poor performance or something like that. But they really just black and white, they called him and said, actually, it's not working out. We're giving you your notice, 3 months. You tell us, which is a bit weird, whether you want to work it or be paid in lieu of notice. It's like, well, okay, but that's not really your choice. It's their choice, what they want you to do. So I said, have you got that in writing? And he said, no. I said, so if you go back and ask for it in writing, then we'll see what they come up with as a formulation. And he rang and the chairman said, oh yeah, no, actually, I don't want to put it in writing. But if you write something, I'll confirm it. And by the way, all of our conversations are without prejudice. They're not. There was no without prejudice conversation. It was just, I'm giving you your notice. And if you're firing somebody, and this is a problem with protected conversations, and this is why we are always very eager to help our clients with these, is you cannot say, I am going to fire you, you need to sign this because this is the only way you're going to get money. If you say anything like, if you say, I'm going to fire you because you're pregnant, I need to get rid of you because you're pregnant, that is not protected by the off the record, the without prejudice. All of those definite I am going to fire you conversations, which they used to have in the good old days when employers were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do, guess what? We have laws and rulings on that says you can't do that, which is why we're always like, so you would be going through a redundancy process and you might be made redundant. And if you were made redundant, you would get this amount. So we'd like to offer you this. It's all very iffy and up in the air, and it does feel very airy-fairy when we're doing it, but you have to phrase it like that so that what you're saying cannot be used against you as unfair dismissal claim or discrimination. And so them saying you're dismissed means that it's not, they can say without prejudice as many times as they want. They can write 200 lines of it. It's irrelevant because it doesn't apply, because they've not said if you would like to do this rather than a performance management process, you can have X amount of money. And you always have to pay them, if you're going to do a settlement agreement, that without prejudice, you have to pay them more than they're legally entitled to. So they've got the 3 months notice, fine, he's entitled to that. They then have to pay him more to give up his right to sue. And they just don't seem to be doing that right. So yes, so that's a new one as well. But I haven't had that from committees for a long time. They do other silly things, but they haven't done that one. But it really is to remember, if they're over 2 years, no matter what contract they're on, you cannot just give them notice. You have to go through a process, and it's then calling us to say, this is the situation, these are the people, these are their characteristics, age, you know, race, anything like that. And then we can give you the options for the best way to part company, because we're not usually saying you need to keep them. We know that's not a viable option, but it's working out what's the best way to part company if you need to do that, which is such an upbeat conversation to have just before Christmas. I'm just saying. And the other thing, sorry, this came up last week when somebody was saying, oh yeah, I want to make somebody redundant in the office. Well, not redundant, she was under, it is redundant, but she's under 2 years, so you don't have to do the process. He said, so I want to get rid of her, I'm going to make her redundant, I'm going to do that in the first week in January. And I'm like, no, if you're thinking about doing that now, you need to do it now, because otherwise she's got Christmas, we don't know what her commitments, family, anything like that is, but she may well go out and spend a lot of money for Christmas thinking she's got a salary coming in a month in, you know, New Year, that she's got a job, and then the first week back you say, oh yeah, actually you're redundant, bye, here's your notice period, and she's got all those debts that she thought she was going to be able to pay off. So I know it doesn't feel good. Instinctively you think, oh, I shouldn't make somebody redundant before Christmas. No, it's not great, but it's even worse to do it in January. So if you don't want to do it in December, then you need to leave it till February to give them a chance, okay? And it's still better to do it in December, before Christmas, because at least they can control their spending and they don't go wild and say, oh, well, it's fine, I'll be employed next year as well, okay? Sorry, that's such upbeat. I need to find more upbeat subjects for next week. It is going to be that I'm not finishing now, but we are going to have our last one of this year next week. I know I can see Mel's got a nice Christmassy jumper on. I've got my most Christmassy jumper on, but it's not as Christmassy as yours. Yours is much nicer, thank you. And so it is Christmas jumper or Christmas tops or Christmas antlers next week. Okay.
It's Children in Need Christmas Jumper Day today.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Children in Need Christmas Jumper Day. There you go. There you go. I've got this, so that's fantastic. Good. Are there any questions today? I appreciate we've been talking at people. Chris Donovan, do you want to unmute yourself, Chris? I can't see you.
Hello, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Considering making a cost of living payment to the staff, is there any way of doing that without tax, NI, etc.?
Yes, the way is that the club pays the tax and the NI. Right. So as long as it's paid, HMRC doesn't care who pays it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
The other alternative to consider, although it's maybe not as generous, is to do what's called a trivial benefit payment, and that is anything up to the value of £50. So not cash, can't be cash, but you can do vouchers. So an Amazon voucher, a John Lewis voucher. It can't be a exclusively food and drink voucher. HMRC doesn't like food and drink, but anything that could, so John Lewis could be also exchanged at Waitrose, for example, but they don't care, that's fine. But any voucher up to £50 would be seen as tax-free and a trivial benefit. HMRC doesn't care about it. There's no tax or NI to pay on it. And you can do that for each of your employees up to 6 times a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Any other questions, or have we shocked you with all my negative stories? Mel.
You said about the bad weather policy, which I know I've got one. I had a quick look at it, and apparently it covers, which I hadn't realised, things like train strikes and stuff as well. So it's actually called bad weather / disruption policy or something. Where you can expect people to either take holiday or unpaid leave. So
or a taxi, for that matter.
Or a taxi.
Yeah.
Exactly that. So that was useful actually to discover that. The question I did have is, do you have a process or a series, if you like? I know you put a lot of things on Dropbox, but do you have any sort of key process documents? I'll give you an example of what I was thinking, because if not, I'm going to think of making these. Well, let's say there's a minor misdemeanor. Somebody is late for the 2nd or 3rd time, or they just do something that's not like the end of the world, but it's just annoying and you need to say something, right? So having a little process like misdemeanor process. So step 1 is tell them blah 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 within 24 hours. The second one might be follow that up with an email. Step 2, step 3 might be whatever. So I'm just giving you an example of what this sort of simple process is, but I would like to sort of try and give myself some frequently used situations. Doesn't have to be a process for anything as involved as redundancy, because you're not doing that every week or whatever.
No, please don't.
No, but I think there are some, if you like, more common, what I say, day-to-day HR-y things. Usually, as I say, misdemeanors and not following not following orders or that type of stuff. And it would just be good to have a little thing so I could consistently, first of all, if I'm not there and someone takes my place as far as admonishment, they can just follow a process that's down. And secondly, it means that I can do the same thing for everybody, because at a lesser level, I don't know if anyone else feels this, but when it's sort of minor things, sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a verbal mention, and it's just not as consistent. And I thought that it might be better to be more consistent.
No, absolutely. I mean, we don't have a process for that. We would always strongly recommend that if there is a minor misdemeanor, that you're having a private chat with them. Say, okay, you were late again today. What happened? We talked about this last week. Okay, what can you put in place to make sure that you're not late tomorrow? Oh, and that you then make, as a business owner, a note of that. Either in their personnel file or in your diary, it doesn't matter, but you make a note of it, the date and time that you spoke to them about it. It is supposed to be sort of 3 strikes, and then you would be aiming to escalate to a disciplinary, to at least to an investigation meeting. I wouldn't say that I would say, okay, the first time is you have a word and the second time you have an email, that you would always have the word, because it's always going to be scarier to talk to the boss or the manager face to face about why you're late. And also it's more difficult to lie effectively if you're doing it face to face. In an email, it's really easy to come up with something, believable and not care about it. So we would always say it's better to do it face to face, and to do it as quickly as possible after the incident has been discovered. If you know they were supposed to be in at 9 and they're at 9:15, at 9:16 you're having this conversation. You're not having it within 24 hours. Because okay, so don't take this the wrong way, but employees are a little bit sometimes like dogs. Okay, if you don't do it, then they forget, and you say, well, when you were late yesterday, and then they go, was I late yesterday? It's like, yes, you were, because I wrote it down. Whereas if you do it at 9:16, as they come through the door with their coat on, it's really clear that they are late. There is no, oh, was I late? I didn't realise, sort of thing. Yeah. Right. So that's why it's always better to do it as close to the time as possible. So
because it was a thing this morning. I didn't act on it straight away because there were clients there, and I didn't want to say anything in front of clients. This was the thing. what makes it a little bit more unpalatable is that yesterday, 10 minutes before closure, they think I'm not there, but I have cameras. They've closed down the computers and already leaving the building sort of 10, 15 minutes early. And the next day, the audacity to turn up 5 minutes late, walk past me, not even say, oh, sorry, I'm late or anything. No mention of it at all.
Right. So, so that's when you go back now and say, can I have a private word? And you go into private and you say, right, so I saw that you left yesterday, 15, whatever the time was, early. What was the reason for that? Oh, I didn't. Yes, you did. And go through that. So please don't do that. Please work until the time that I pay you for. I will be deducting that money from your payroll. Okay. And then this morning you came in 5 minutes late. Yeah, because They'll probably jump in with an excuse. It's like, okay, but you walked past me, you didn't apologize for being late, but you knew you were late. Didn't I? No, you didn't. Please make sure that you come and tell me and apologize to me if you're late. And actually, you should tell me in advance. You should send me a text message, give me a call. You've got my mobile number. You know, if you're trapped in traffic, you should do that. That's what you should do. You can do a phone call. You've got hands-free, haven't you? No, well, you should do, because, you know, everybody's got, you know, Bluetooth headphones. It shouldn't be a problem. So we have that conversation, and then put a note down. And then the next time that happens, because it does sound like you do need to do that face to face. That wouldn't be an email or anything. You've got it written down. That's all you need to do. It doesn't need to be an official letter to her or anything. And then if it happens again, we can make the decision, depending on what it is, whether we want to escalate to an investigation meeting. Even if we then decide we're just going to do an advisory note, we don't have to go through the whole process, but it just, some people don't get it until you're in a formal meeting with a formal letter. They say, oh, you actually meant be on time. Oh, okay, I can do that.
Yeah, this is the insubordination one that didn't want to drive and all. You knew that anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly. No worries.
Yeah. Okay. Right, there's a couple of things in the chat. I just wanted to check. Oops, my chat is really weird. It's done it really large font and really long. So I have to scroll through like 3 pages to see what we've got there. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's it. So if there's no other, well, it's 1 o'clock now. I think we'll quit while we're ahead before I come up with any more negative stories about how to deal with employees. Next week, like I said, is our last one, 12:30. Chris, have you got a question? Sorry.
No, sorry. I was meant to stop the video, but I will say I won't be here next week because we have a meal at 12 or 12:30 with our greenkeeping team. So
oh yes, okay.
This is, I won't see you until next year. So have a good Christmas.
Yes, exactly.
Everyone.
But we'll see you back on again. If you give us your email address, we'll make sure you can come back on again and chat to us anyway.
Absolutely. Thank you for everything.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so I've got a question. Sorry, one last question here from JT. Sorry, my chat is not helping me here. Can you make people make up the time they are late? Yes, to a point. In as much it does depend a little bit on what their other commitments are, because if they say they have to go at 5 because they've got to pick up the children and there's no way they can work late, then that's going to be tricky. They might be able to do it at lunchtime, but you need to make sure that they have the minimum amount of break. So you've got the contractual amount of break, but you've also got a minimum of 20 minutes break. Okay, so make sure you don't go over that. It's working it out. So yes, you in principle you absolutely can. It's just working out what's going to be feasible, whether they can come in a bit earlier or work a bit later, or whether you even want them to do that. Is there anything for them to do other than just physically sitting on the desk? I don't know. So that is, sorry, so it's it depends on the case. Yes, you can legally make them do that, but just practicalities of it, you need to look at it. Okay.
And if you discover that they've spent, like they're meant to be leaving at 1 o'clock, and as we speak, they've been on their phone for 10 minutes, again, can you say, like, I'm not paying you for that 10 minutes because you've just sat there on your phone?
Yes. Well, yeah, you need to go back on the phone now. I mean, I don't know where you are, Mel. If you were in the same physical location as to go and say, you've been on your phone for 10 minutes, you're not allowed to do that. You won't be paid for it.
Right. Okay. Because I can actually, because I record the camera footage, I can actually see exact how long this has happened. but I know that yeah, it's been a while, so that's in addition to the lateness
Yes.
and the early leaving.
Yes, exactly. And it's saying, okay, you need to not go on it. And if they keep going on it, despite, and you can see where they keep going on it, is say, actually, I'm going to have to put, because this is what they do in nurseries. Francis, my daughter, has to do it at IKEA, that they have to leave their phone in their locker. They are not allowed their phone while they're on shift. They can absolutely go to it while they're on the break. And if they say, well, I need it in case there's an emergency with children, you need it. They need to call the office, the main number, the switchboard number. So call that's absolutely fine. If there's an emergency, they absolutely can call that number and get hold of you, because you're sat there. So you will pick up, that's fine. But you are not to go on the phone. And I've had to say this to you 3 times now on this occasion, this occasion, this occasion. Therefore, I'm afraid you're going to have to leave it in a locker or away from where you are. You are not allowed to go on it. And that's it. And that's when she probably walks out and says, stuff this for a lark, I'm going. And you say, oh, what a shame, bye-bye.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation we need to take off or continue off the Zoom, I think.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Fine. All right, everybody, hopefully see you next week. Any questions, give us a call. Bye.